hello and welcome to Sheffield Vineyard. My name's Alex Griffin, and right now I just want to do a little talk. It's a talk called Deepening Our Dependency on Jesus. And in this talk, I just want to make a simple point, and that is that we apprehend the antidote to anxiety when we deepen our dependency on Jesus. There's been lots of change recently. There's been a new change in government leadership. There's been a new change in the head of state. Other matters that might make us a little bit anxious, perhaps, to name but a few, include the military offensive in Ukraine by Russia. There's the climate crisis. And then there's been lots of change that's happened over a prolonged period of time. COVID has and continues to be something that affects our relationships with each other. It's increased the inequality and it's exacerbated poor mental health in a lot of people. The cost of living crisis has further widened the gap between the haves and the haven'ts. And then many of us are experiencing changes in our personal circumstances. Maybe you've got a new job. Maybe you've broken your leg. Some of you will be in our wonderful city, Sheffield, for the first time. You're a student and you've come to start a new course at university, and you've come to find some new friends, learning to fend for yourself for the first time. Well, all these changes and many more besides can cause us anxiety because we like continuity. And many of the factors that have given rise to change have continued for such a long period of time now that a lot of us feel quite weary. And so I really want to make this simple point, that we apprehend the antidote to anxiety when we deepen our dependency on Jesus. You know, throughout the Gospels, Jesus urges us to give him everything, to become entirely dependent upon him. He said that if we try to go through life using our own strength, it will be a struggle and ultimately it just won't work. But if we give all that we have to him, we become able to receive all that he has already given to us. It's a bit like this. Imagine just for one moment you're at home, you hear a knock on the door, and it's Jeff Bezos. He's knocking on your door. You open it, you welcome him in, and he says, "Hi, look, I've got an idea. Why don't we swap bank accounts? Why don't you give me everything you've got, and I'll give you everything I have?" If you don't know, Jeff Bezos, he owns Amazon. He's, I think, the richest person in the world. He has so many billions that he couldn't possibly spend it all in his lifetime. And imagine that scenario happening, and then imagine saying to Jeff, "Well, that's great, what a great idea, but look, if you don't mind, I just want to keep a few things behind. I've been saving up in this pension, and I just want to keep that, just in case. And you want to save just a few other things." I mean, when you think about it, that's completely ridiculous, because Jeff's just given you all of his billions. You don't need that little pension pot or a savings here or there. You can literally give him everything, knowing that he's giving you so much that you don't need anything to keep back. And the problem is the stuff that we keep back when we have this same conversation with God. The stuff that we keep back, it's the stuff that causes us the problems. I want to make the point today by looking at a story, it's in the Bible, about a woman who has a medical condition, which is that she has menstrual bleeding all the time. I wish I got my Bible ready, but I forgot about this bit. But it's reading from Luke 8, and it's verses 40 to 48. And it says this: "Now when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. And then a man named Jairus, a ruler from the synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. And as Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. And she came up from behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. "Who touched me?" Jesus asked. And when they all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out of me." And then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at the feet in the presence of all the people. And she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. And then he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." You see, this is a story of someone who believed that if she was to simply touch the clothes of Jesus, she could be healed. It's a story of faith. But it's more than that. It's a story about someone who was prepared to sacrifice everything so as to receive a wonderful life with Jesus. Now, for us to really fully appreciate this story, we need to understand something about ritual cleanliness. You see, in the Old Testament biblical times, a person was generally clean, but could be regarded as ritually unclean for numerous reasons. I mean, examples include skin diseases, or if you were to touch something that was dead, or to eat certain types of food, and if you were to have some bodily discharges. That meant that in those times, any woman who menstruated or any couple who had sex, well, they were regarded as unclean, and they had to take steps to return to a state of cleanliness. And this was a serious matter. You see, if someone did not take action to ritually clean themselves up, then they could be on the receiving end of some divine retribution. It could be expelled from the community because they were seen to be at risk of infecting others. And if they went to the temple in a state of uncleanliness, they could die. I'm not going to read it to you now, but why don't you read Leviticus 15, 19 to 20, and then 25 to 27 and 31. Just have a flick through those. You'll just get an impression of how important it was in those days for a woman who menstruated to not associate with anyone else whilst she was subject to that period of her life. Now, rest assured, I don't normally talk a lot about menstrual bleeding, but we need to know this because in this story we're looking at a woman who touched the clothes of Jesus, a rabbi. She was ritually unclean, and that made all of this a really big issue. I mean, let's run through the story again, bearing that in mind. Okay, so you've got Jesus arrives. The crowd gathers around. They're wanting to see another one of his infamous miracles, or maybe hear some of his outlandish teaching. And in the crowd is a woman. We don't know her name, but she's come because she's got an ongoing bleeding condition. She's had it for 12 years. And for 12 years, she's been regarded as unclean, unable to be near anyone else in the community. And she's come because maybe Jesus could heal her if only she were to touch him. A ruler from a synagogue arrives. It's Jairus. He's panicked. He's desperate. He implores Jesus to come and heal his dying daughter. And the crowd press in to hear what Jesus might say or what he might do. This is her opportunity to make her move. And she needs to make it soon because, Jesus might be leaving to go to Jairus' house at any time now. So with her head covered and in disguise, she moves in. She reaches between a couple of people stood behind Jesus, and she just about manages to touch the hem of his clothes with the tips of her fingers. No pulling, just a little brush. And then somehow, I don't know how, the woman instantly knew that she had been healed. Wow. Not only had she performed a stealth mission, she got into the crowd and managed to get near Jesus without anyone noticing her, but she was healed of an affliction that had plagued her for 12 years. All she needed to do now was to slowly move away and not be recognised. And so she took a back step and she started to make her retreat. But then she heard those words. Hold on, who is that? Someone touched me. Someone touched me just now. Who was it? It's a really strange thing for Jesus to say by most accounts because, Jesus was in a crowd. He's being pulled and pushed and shoved in every direction. And Peter looked confused. So, he said, there's loads of people around. What do you mean someone touched you? But no one owned up. And only one woman really knew what Jesus was talking about. And Jesus, he carried on. He said, no, I know that someone touched me because I felt power come out of me. All the people, they must have started to look at each other. Their focus wasn't any longer on Jesus. They were kind of, who's he talking about? And then maybe someone saw this lady. She stooped over, head, looking at the ground, and she's looking pretty sheepish. She looks like she doesn't want anyone to notice her. And then the woman saw that more and more of the crowd were staring at her. Anyone else could have just said, look, hey, it was me. I had this problem and I thought, well, if I touch Jesus, it would all just go away. So, hey, I've got faith that Jesus heals. That sounds like a great thing, doesn't it? But the woman was unclean, and that made all the difference. She wasn't allowed to be there. She wasn't allowed to be in a crowd brushing up against everyone else, least of all a rabbi. But knowing that the game was up, she fell before Jesus and explained who she was, why she had come, what had just happened. She just got healed. And she said it in front of everyone. Far from being happy, she knew that the crowd wouldn't see her as someone of faith. She was unclean. She made everyone else she just touched unclean. And she even purposefully touched a rabbi. By declaring all of this, by declaring who she was and why she'd been there, she was admitting to a crime that could lead to the death penalty. And you know what? I think that Jesus knew all of this. I suspect that he knew exactly who touched him. Anyone who senses, healing power emanating from themselves is smart enough to know who touched him. And I suspect he knew who she was and the consequences she would face by owning up and even being in the crowd. Jesus knew, and so why did he stop everyone and draw attention to her? I think it could be because he wanted to hear her say, it was me. And right now, I'm scared of what will happen to me, but I just needed to be close to you. I just needed for you to heal me. That woman declared her hope and her healing in Jesus, knowing that by doing so, she might die. And that's what Jesus wanted to hear. I mean, he wanted the whole crowd to hear. Maybe they would learn something. And this is what he then said to her. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace. The story moves on, but I suspect that woman lived a full life, better than she lived before she met Jesus. And there are some things that are easy to give to God, and there are some things that are easy to ask of him, but then there are some things that we find hard to hand over. There are some times when giving our everything to God means we need to be brave. And just as that woman went from that crowd in peace and freedom, I wonder whether there's any one of us listening to this talk who might want to just give to God hurts that you have. And that might just take you to be really brave. But I just think we might need to make this story personal. This is a story for all of us who feel unwell, who have worries, who have burdens, fears, and anxiety. What does this story teach us? Well, it calls us to come to Jesus, to give him our everything, to hold nothing back, to make him our priority each and every day. That would be our daily act of faith, and it would make us well. So I just want to pray just very briefly now for anyone who's listening to this, and even now as I'm speaking, you might just think to yourself, look, I'm really worried because of some relationships that either I would like or I'm in the middle of. Maybe there's some matters relating to your security in wealth. Maybe you're a student and you're just feeling a little bit bad because you've had a couple of nights out, too many, and that's meant that it's got round to Sunday morning and you just think, I'm just a bit too tired, and one thing's just led to another, and you've just wandered away from a church and some of your Christian friends, and you're just not in a place where you'd love to be. And I think for some people there's just a lot of shame, and it might be something because you've done something wrong, or it might be something that's just something wrong has been done to you. We're not here to make any judgments. We're here just to provide a place for us to come in the presence of Jesus and be brave with some faith that he heals us. So I'm going to say a prayer, and if you'd like, you can just sort of pray along with me. Lord, I just want to come into your presence now. There are hurts in me. There are pains that I don't want to endure anymore. And I want to give them over to you. I want your healing. Help me to develop and deepen a dependency on you each and every day. Help me to make you my priority. Help me to come to you, because every time I come to you, you seem to make me feel better. You seem to cleanse me and heal me. So Lord, once again, it might be the 1000th time, but once again, I just want to come to you, Lord, and ask you, will you take all the rubbish and give me all of your goodness? And if that's a prayer that you've said, then why don't you just carry on? I'm going to leave you to it. Why don't you just sit in the silence and just let God minister to you? As for me, bye-bye, and I'll see you again soon.